You may recall that a week ago I used a quotation of which I'm going to only use a part from Jung's collected writings, volume 15, the one that deals with art and literature, in which Jung made a very peculiar statement regarding the psychological approach to art, and I'll read part of it again. Only the aspect of art which consists in the process of artistic creation can be a subject for psychological study, but not that which constitutes its essential nature. The question of what art is in itself can never be answered by a psychologist. Now this is maybe mildly cryptic, but I think its revelatory quality outweighs its crypticity, if there is such a word. And I think in it Jung brings to our attention that in the matter of artistic creativity, we are dealing with something that is beyond, at least, let's say, the personal psyche, the ego of the individual. That there is really a connection with something else. That there is something on the side of the occult, the mystical, the transcendental, in the process of art, and particularly in, let's say, in the creative process, and that this is really beyond the study of ordinary psychology. You really need to extend the feelers, if we can put it that way, of your knowledge into realms and regions which are beyond that which ordinarily is understood to be psychological. So we might even get a little bit ahead of ourselves, and I might even venture a suggestion a bit ahead of our dealing with the subject matter, indicating that without a connection, without an interior awareness, come on in folks and sit down, without an interior awareness of a realm of consciousness which is, well, let's say, literally not of this world, it is very likely that our apprehension and comprehension of art and the creativity involved in art will not be present. Now, like in so many other areas of endeavor, which, let's say, borders on the spiritual, or might be called spiritual, it is important that one begin the cognitive process with a certain background. People who have no inclination toward the transcendental will in all likelihood not deal much in their lives with the transcendental, because you might say, they have made up their minds that as the farmer said in the zoo when he saw a giraffe, well, but there ain't no such animal. So, because those to whom the transcendental does not exist, well, then it doesn't exist. And therefore it's very only in the very unusual and kind of quirky conditions does some of it intrude into the experience of such people. And it is regrettable, but true, that for quite a number of decades now, maybe even longer, much of our own storehouse of artistic creativity, especially of a verbal nature, namely literature, has not been very friendly to the principle of transcendence. In fact, sort of synchronistically, just today I was sent an essay by the late and great T.S. Eliot entitled Religion and Literature. T.S. Eliot wrote this in 1935, so I was but a small fry at the time, not reading any much literature probably. And I'll give you a portion, a quotation from that, because I think it's very cogently expressed, and more importantly, I agree with it. Here is T.S. Eliot. We must remember that the greater part of our current reading matter is written for us by people who have no real belief in a supernatural order, though some of it may be written by people with individual notions of a supernatural order which are not ours. And the greater part of our reading matter, this is the important part, the greater part of our reading matter is coming to be written by people who not only have no such belief, but are even ignorant of the fact that there are still people in the world so, quote, backward or eccentric as to continue to believe in such things. So long as we are conscious of the gulf fixed between ourselves and the greater part of contemporary literature, we are more or less protected from being harmed by it and are in a position to extract from it what good it has to offer us. Well, if Eliot was right about this tendency in 1935, certainly it is even more abundantly evident today that this is correct. We of course need to remember that in 1935 certainly literature was very influential. Curiously enough, people were reading at that time, but since then, well, let's say books have received powerful and often, I would say, somewhat counterproductive competition in that word that I can only pronounce usually with a fierce and hostile expression on my countenance, namely the media, which really have made things worse. That's not to be wondered at, but somehow in this world, and I've lived by now long enough to have experienced a good time span in the history of this world, an awful lot of things don't get better. In German, which I think we always had lately one or two or more friends here who were conversant with the German language. In German we have a saying, selten kommt was Besseres nach. this is vernacular. Very seldom does anything better follow after, namely after now. And I would say, unfortunately, one can agree with that. And so I think that we have an even greater discrepancy, certainly now, and consequently certain problems in the cultural sphere and elsewhere, which T.S. Eliot alluded to in 1935. Now, in order to investigate some of this in connection with the subject of theater and drama, if I don't falter in the process, I propose to present to you a very outlandish theory. It will unfold, I hope, as I go on. And then, of course, it's always up to you to either find that theory capable of being sympathized with or the contrary. Now, first of all, this has not that much to do with my theory, only a little, that the human being appears to be a natural mimic. I never had any children, sometimes to my regret and sometimes to my relief, depending on the time of my life. But I have been around children, and I have noticed that children of almost all ages, beginning with really small fry, they know how to imitate. And I came to the conclusion that the human being is a natural mimic. We like to mimic what we observe and whom we observe. And you might say there are many forms of imitation. And if we now jump from the the subject of small children to sort of what might be called, metaphorically at least, the childhood of humanity, then we find that among the earliest evidences of what could be called magical imitation are the representatives of very ancient people. In the Stone Age, we find people who engaged in imitative representation. Some people have called it imitative magic, and the most prominent products of these very, very early artistic activities we find in a place, in a geographical location, where to my great joy we have been some years ago, although we did not get into the depths of the earth to see these artistic products, namely in the caves of the Ariège in the Pyrenees, which are right sort of on the border of the south of France and the north of Spain. And there we find some of the earliest examples of what might be called Stone Age art. And there we find pictures of human beings, of men, engaged in imitating the behavior of certain animals. Dressed in animal skins, as far as these are carvings in the walls of the caves. And man, oh man, there must be a lot more there than what they have discovered, because that area is honeycombed with caves. We stayed, it's all over the place, wherever you go, you know. We stayed for a little while in a lovely old medieval town called Belvès, in the lowest etage, well, the lowest portion of the building, which was sort of a sub-basement, was a great big hole in the wall. And I said, what is that for? And, well, he says, if you don't mind getting lost, and maybe getting lost forever, you can go through that hole and keep going, because that's the entrance to these honeycombs of caves which just go on and on and on. I said, well, thank you very much, I didn't come here to get lost. And so certainly we didn't go in, but it's all over the place. And it is in these caves that these examples of early art have been found. So what seems to be the case, what seems to be depicted in these etched paintings or whatever we might call them on the walls of the caves, there are the people are dressed in animal skins, and usually with the antlers of stags tied to their heads. They perform what would appear to be solemn activities, play-acting as probably animals, as deer. Now, the anthropologists, of course, are very smart people, but that doesn't mean that they are always right. But they have concluded, for the most part, that these drawings were not for the purpose of amusing the Stone Age performers, but that the people were performing some kind of arts of magic. A kind of magic that is often called imitative magic, and it is considered a very important part of the spiritual life of archaic peoples. Now, that's the pretty standard archaeological opinion. However, its exact nature or operative mechanism seems to have been not understood, I think, by the archaeologists, and we might have a little suggestion about it. Anthropologists seem to think that people in the old Stone Age dressed up as animals because they wanted to make certain things happen in connection with animals, such as plentiful hunting, the continued presence of animal life in their area of the country, and so forth. Later, in what is, there is the Stone Age is usually divided into several sub-ages by the anthropologists. So there is an old Stone Age and there is a new Stone Age. So in the new Stone Age, the same principle seems to have appeared in connection with a later development of human activity, namely agriculture. And there the anthropologists say, and once again their conclusions are probably, at least in part, correct, that the first agriculturists, the first farmers, would, so the anthropologists would tell us, were giving hints to nature when they wanted rain to fall. That when they wanted rain to fall, they poured out water from a pail, mimicking the downpour in the hope of getting one. Now, fortunately, I am not an anthropologist, but to my Gnostic layman's mind, this doesn't make much sense. I honestly don't think that human beings were ever so primitive or so benighted that they felt that they could show the rain how to fall. I just don't believe that. Now, I could be wrong. But as Leonard Cohen said, that's what they told me in the Tower of Song. You remember Leonard Cohen and his wonderful song? Well, anyway, and with this come all kinds of things, including the rather intriguing proposition that the anthropologists, and this you can find this in Fraser, you can find a lot of it in 19th century literature and elsewhere, they believed that the early humanity was once again trying to show nature how to reproduce. Again, I think it's not a very believable issue, but all kinds of interesting and somewhat salacious theories attach themselves to this, because the anthropologists propounded, I think really pretty much without evidence, that the early agriculturists would go out into the fields and have sex there. Fortunately with each other, I mean humans, not bestiality. And that they did that in order to teach Mother Nature how to reproduce. When I read it in Fraser and various people, I was already shaking my head, and I'm still shaking my head. All this is referred to as imitative magic, and it is, according to the anthropologist, is the origin of drama, of theater. Now, Oscar Wilde, who said a lot of wild things, Oscar Wilde had a lot of witty statements, and one of them was, nature imitates art. But he meant it in a much more advanced sense, namely the relationship between natural creativity, the creativity of nature, and the creativity of humans. So I don't know whether Oscar Wilde's statement was very far-fetched or not, but certainly if applied in this anthropological sense, I think it's a bit peculiar. Now, we need to understand a little bit, when we talk about such things, the magical philosophy. Now, in the let's say in the magical understanding of life, it is understood, and it is understood, I think, in a much more sensible way than in much later philosophy and spirituality, that there is a mysterious underlying unity of all things, of being, that even though our minds, especially our thinking function, as we would call it in a Jungian sense, creates all sorts of categories and divisions, it is really, we really live in an unobstructed universe. If we are able to affinitize ourselves to that lack of obstruction and to have our consciousness move within the various chambers, let's say, of universal being. What obstructs our awareness is usually human folly, human misunderstanding, a human alienation from the underlying reality of things. In order to have the feeling that we really understand life, we understand nature and so forth, we come up with all sorts of ideas which alienate us rather than join us to the underlying realities of being, of existence. And that is an important issue. In the Gnostic tradition, which, at least in my opinion, is age-old. Let's say, wherever you go, whatever existing spiritual tradition, you go to Hindus, you go to the Buddhists, especially Mahayana Buddhism, even believe it or not, with their present bad reputation to the Muslims, you will find that there is an underlying, largely buried and neglected, and at times even repressed and suppressed tradition of gnosis there. One of my favorite classes when I was teaching religion, actually, believe it or not, was about Islam, and I was even so devoted once that I tried to learn Arabic. If you have that ambition, I would like to discourage you. It's very, I know a few languages, but that is really difficult. Different alphabet, different but grammar, different this, different that. But in any event, let's say there is sufficient evidence, and it is actually believed in by many Islamic mystics, many Sufi schools, that there was a pre-existing mystical tradition which came to be incorporated into Islam, and which then became the basis of the various Sufi schools. So it's not something that I or anyone else has dreamt up out of whole cloth. Now, when we have even some basic affinity toward this universal secret tradition, then we find that one of its key maxims, one of its key teachings is that what the human being is suffering from is alienation. Alienation from what? Alienation from a true reality. That somehow we have lost contact with a greater reality with which at one time we were connected. And that a lot of our difficulties, our sufferings, our ways of acting in counterproductive ways have to do with that. Now, so we are there confronted with a great tragedy, and that tragedy is alienation. It's not, and of course it expresses itself in various traditions by different metaphors, but the underlying meaning is the same. And so the relationship between the inner world, the depth of the psyche, the area where soul and spirit and transcendence meet, and the outer world is more intimate than we realize. There is a connection, but we have forgotten it. We have moved away from it. We don't recognize it, but it is there, and it is very important. So there is a phenomenon of projection, of course. So as we do something, we can see it outside of us. They say, oh yeah, I am doing this, it looks like nature is doing this also. There is a sympathy. We affinitize ourselves to outer processes and outer phenomena. As we do something, we tune into a certain kind of activity, and then it happens by synchronicity. So one can only speak about these matters in fairly highly metaphorical ways. But what is really happening here, that there is an underlying awareness of our own alienation from reality. We have a feeling that somehow, some way in our consciousness, we have been close to the real, to the true, but that we no longer are. And this is very, very sad. And so we struggle with it, we compensate for it, all kinds of things of that sort. So what do we do? Well, if we do things in a productive manner, which of course often we don't, but certainly, let's say, Stone Age humanity was still close enough, you might say, to the source that it intuitively followed certain important developments. Then we do something that helps. Namely, we look around and we try to perceive, well, signs and wonders, by which we mean we try to see phenomena both in the natural and in the supernatural world, which seem to remind us or seem to have a connection with that reality that we have lost. So the signs, the omens, as the ancient Greco-Roman world called them, omen, the omens remind us of a forgotten and repressed reality. And that is why we seek the omens. You know, this is very much like, it's based on the same principle as something that I was very interested in at one time. I haven't lost my interest, but one can go only so far in it, namely divination. My divinatory modality, on which I wrote a little book that a lot of people liked and still like. When it was published in 1975, it has seen innumerable printings and 2 major editions. You know, people still like it. And I like it that they like it. But let's say divination really consists of the utilization of signs, and thereby being led into some deeper recognitions. So that, say, a tarot card is a sign. It points toward something. It isn't a big magical object in itself that you have to live in awe of, because as far as that, it's just a piece of paper. But the image there acts as a sign. It acts as a memento something that reminds you of something deeper. And if you utilize these things in the proper fashion, then that is what will happen. Now, all right, let's try to apply this principle now for a minute or two to our quandary here about the Stone Age human. So what was the Stone Age man, the Stone Age human? What was he trying to do? Or probably she as well. What were they trying to do by depicting themselves on the walls of the caves where probably for the most part they lived, where they dwelt, with antlers and carrying animal skins? Well, obviously we cannot have any precise knowledge of that at this time. But how would this be? I'm jumping ahead of myself. How would it be that these so-called primitives, I don't like the term primitive, I think that archaic, which means very ancient, is probably better. Maybe the archaic human was puzzled about something. And what he may have been puzzled about was that, you know what, we have become, we act like animals, you know. So a strange underlying and maybe somewhat disturbing kinship with the animal kingdoms came to their mind. Why is that? You know, why are we are running around just like the deer in the forest, and maybe other things too. Maybe animals that are a little bit less archetypal and less noble. You know, maybe we have become like pigs, which is perhaps one reason why some cultures are pretty pig-oriented, are friendly to pigs, and then there are others that are very antagonistic to pigs. And there again, you know, I tell you this cultural anthropologists are a weird bunch of people. I read a really learned large book that I found somewhere in Chicago that basically organized all of humanity according to whether they liked pigs or whether they disliked pigs. So it's a kind of a porcine science, you know. But again, it's not entirely without some reasons and some observations. However, let us say here we are dealing with, I think, with a greater existential, possibly an existential issue, and that is deeply within us, and what Jung would call the collective unconscious, way down to the great archetypes like the self with a capital S and so forth. We have a dim awareness, a dim memory that the way we are, that the way we live, that the things that we do and so forth, that these are not according to our deepest nature. That our lack of authenticity, you know, like the existentialists always talking about authenticity. I have heard more talk about authenticity among my university friends in Innsbruck. They all wore turtleneck sweaters, wore berets and talked about authenticity. After a while they bored me, but you know, in India there is something to that we are not expressing the deepest, the most meaningful, which is the most powerful part of ourselves. And yet we have a dim, fantastic memory that there was a time when we did. And this makes us justly sad. We have lost something. And it appears in the various traditions. Of course, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, which spills over into Islam and so forth, the way it is expressed is that there was a paradise. There was an ideal garden where we lived, and where everything was meaningful and beautiful and, let's say, energizing. And then something happened. A profound cosmic catastrophe, and that all of that was lost. And that this is the cause of our underlying melancholy, our underlying sadness. Not so it would seem. This appears in a lot of places and in a lot of traditions. And so it would be conceivable that here are the Stone Age artists, proto-artists, and what are they? What are the pictures that they are putting on the wall? They are putting there a wall of a human with animal features, with antlers, with animal skins and things of that sort. What they are saying is, look, we are human. We are a very different kind of being. We still remember some of it. We are a creature of transcendental origin. We are the children of heaven. We are the offspring of the stars. But we are here and we live like animals. Now, this is not to put animals down. I think most animals that I had contact with in my life, I grew up in the countryside in Hungary and all that, and most animals I liked. And the ones that I see, maybe there are a little bit too many dogs in Beechwood Canyon. I never tried counting them, but oh boy, they're really there, It's become a very canine neighborhood here. But let's say to have undergone a degradation. Now, degradation means to be taken down a grade, and have become animal-like. This is a sad fate of humanity. And so some of early art is actually expressing that, and let's say moaning and crying about it. Although there are of course other developments as well. Now this only pertains to the cave paintings in the Ariège, but let's say the ancient, there was in addition to that, as time went on, when humans began to devise activities, games, not just painting, not just sculpting, which express mysterious magical principles and magical conundrums, let us say. And these activities became what might be called the magic theater. What was magic? Now, in our times, and for quite a few centuries, has become an entertainment. and an entertainment whereby actors and stage people and so forth can make some money. But there is still a similarity of at least a potential hidden purpose. So now I am going to propound that the theater, the drama, was originally a magical theater, and that much of that magical theater functioned like the paintings in the caves that we were talking about. We call certain things a recreation. We recreate something. And these include movies and televisions and legitimate theater and so forth. What is recreation? Being remade. A creation repeated, or being born again. So I suspect, I won't even be too definite about it, I suspect that the deep psychological roots of theater and of drama are in a desire to redo and recreate reality. So we find that from a vital principle of imitative magic that we were talking about, drama was born. What was the first play of which anything is known? Well, you probably might have guessed it, because what is sort of the oldest doggone place that we know about in the world and in history is ancient Egypt. So in a city of which in Greek ways is pronounced Abydos in ancient Egypt, around 4,000 years ago, in the reign of Serotnin III, I'm sure you're terribly interested in that, you're writing it down madly, which would be about the 1800s BC, no, not 1800s AD. Well, there was evidence has been found. There were dramas performed which were the dramatization of the life, death and resurrection of Osiris. Well, Osiris, of course, is the great god, the husband of Isis, and the one who, among other things, is killed by his evil brother and then brought back to life and all that sort of thing. Pretty much, as far as one can discover, it is the earliest and the most powerful archetype of the dying and resurrecting God. So in his resurrection, in the Abydian mystery dramas, in his resurrection, ears of grain were represented, because there are pictures of it, where they were represented as springing from his body, like wheat, which of course was the great grain of Egypt. You know, Egypt, clear until Christian times, and so Egypt fed practically all of the Mediterranean world. It was the granary, constant ships going to Rome, to Greece, all over the place. In any event, now Herodotus, the historian, identified Lord Osiris with the Greek god Dionysus, who also gets killed and then comes back to life, and the Dionysian mysteries, well, they were, when contrasted with the Eleusinian mysteries or some others, the Dionysian mysteries were very active, shall we say, and very wild in their activities. So you might, for which reason they, as others, was suspected that the people who, the initiates, were partaking of some psychedelic substance. We have no exact proof of that, but the proof was there that the Dionysian mysteries, more so than we can discover about the others, the transformed and transforming, the exalted, the wild, the ecstatic consciousness was acted out, was expressed, wasn't just kept inside. And in Rome, there are equivalents of the Greek gods in Rome, because they were really very closely related, and so the Bacchus is the Greek Dionysus. And Bacchus, of course, is associated with drinking wine, but some of the scholars said, oh yes, was there anything in the wine, my precious, more than just a little bit of alcohol that made the people so wild? Well, maybe not, but I would say the likelihood is there. Now, the Dionysians were probably the first Greco-Roman mystery, and I don't like to use the term mystery school, but the first mystery which had started its own theater. The Dionysian plays. The Dionysian plays were enacted in the spring, and they were going on for at least an entire week. How long does the Christian mystery story, the mystery play of Easter lasts? A week. In any event, that's just an interesting little similarity. So the dramas then became a public manifestation of the mysteries which themselves were secret, and in which the initiate became the player in lieu of the observer. So this developed two forms of Greek drama, the tragedy and the comedy. And you are familiar with their symbols, which I think are more Roman by then than Greek. The masks, one of them with a grinning mask, and the other one with a downturned mouth. The sad and the happy. And they are the comedy and the tragedy. Also, the tragedy, tragedia in Greek, comes from the term goat song. Now, I've been around a few goats. I have not heard really any of them sing, although they have their usually pretty penetrating voice. This is a goat song. It was a tumultuous performance with chants, where the performers were seen as half animal. And they were also referred to out of the original tragedy, the goat song. They developed what were called the satiric plays, which are an early version, early branch of the tragedy. But we still to this day also have the dramatic form of satire. These often involved an reenactment of the, again, somewhat animalistic in their appearance, the great god Pan, the universal god. Pan means everything, you know, and Silenus, the forest god. Silenus is and their associates, their hosts. So what do we have here once again? Pan. Well, Pan is part human, but certainly also part animal. Has horns, has hoofs like a goat, so what we have here is again a reminder from the mythological, from the godly level, look people, you have become like animals. Now, Pan was a pretty popular fellow, and he should be, you know, because obviously the mythology is quite complicated. But I think the original, the artistic origins of a Mischwesen of this sort, as the German word has it, which is actually the technical term in mythology and elsewhere, a mixed being. For instance, the Sphinx is a Mischwesen, and Pan is a Mischwesen. So let's say mixed. And of course there are others. There is the Centaur, which is related to my astrological sign of Sagittarius, which has a human torso, but the rest of the body is horse. And therefore, undoubtedly, if you don't mind the silly pun, such creatures certainly can do a lot of horsing around. Once you begin to look for the animal symbolism, and the animal symbolism of that reflects back on the humans, but since the gods are the prototypes and the inspirers of the humans, obviously among the gods and the goddesses also, you find, just like in ancient Egypt, you find the gods which may have, the majority of the Egyptian gods have human body, but they have the heads of the animals. Anubis has the head of the jackal. Again, the only one who never had an animal head, as far as the archaeology discovers, was Osiris. Because the resurrected Osiris is the ideal, in my view, toward the human should aspire. And so let's say the Egyptian theology tells the people, look guys, you have to become real human. And that means you have to become like the gods. You have to become divine human, because the real human is divine. The other is a half animal. So we find this in a lot of places. Just like the antler heads and the skin costumes in the early cave paintings. Now I had a friend, and certainly he was an inspirer and a teacher as well, and I very much recommend his books, which are still around. A few are being published. That was the late Dr. Alvin Boyd Kuhn, Kuhn. And he wrote a fabulous little booklet called Halloween, a Festival of Lost Meanings. It's the best thing on Halloween, in my opinion, that has ever been written. And curiously enough, I met Dr. Kuhn at the lecture he was giving here in Los Angeles, 50-something in the fall. And what do you suppose he was lecturing about when I first met him? He was lecturing about the inner meaning of Halloween. In any event, it's fabulous. The study of symbolism is really, really great. Now, he was a man who got his PhD on writing a dissertation on theosophy at Columbia University in 1931, in the day of my birth, you know. But subsequently he said, now, to really understand these esoteric matters, you have to go to the Egyptians. So he, as a PhD and a teacher already, he took lessons and he taught himself the hieroglyphics. So by the time I knew him, he could write and decipher the hieroglyphics. Fabulous man, fabulous man. But one of the several theses in his little book on Halloween is the fact that our inner spirit is trying to express itself while hidden away in largely animal and other natural forms. So that the masks, tell that to Dr. Fauci, that the masks, the animal masks primarily in the olden times, you know, the masks tell us a story. And it means that we are wearing a disguise here on earth. And that disguise is taken from nature, and it is taken from the animal kingdom. But we are underneath the mask, and we, namely humans of transcendental connections and of transcendental origins. Now, you know, when this lecture gets out, I don't know, maybe we should destroy it, you know, then I will certainly acquire late in life the reputation of somebody who spins wild theories. And it is a wild theory, but it is not so wild that it doesn't make any sense, you know. And if it makes sense, then I think it is worth considering. And so, you know, one could go on with these things, but the drama, let's say, originated that way, to remind humans of their disguise in here on earth and try to waken up to their own true nature. Now, the time is rushing on with us, and well, I brought this book with me too, but it's another one of the books that I recommend. It was the great British scholar Dame Frances Yates, whose chief work came out in the 60s about the Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic tradition. But she was so inspired by Bruno, who was burnt at the stake, by the way, in Rome. If you go to the Campo de Fiore in Rome, which is sort of outdoor ground where they sell flowers and stuff, there is his statue. And I wanted to have my picture taken next to Bruno, which we did. But one of the ubiquitous dirty birds of Rome, I think a dirty Roman pigeon, came and sat on Bruno's head while our double picture was being taken, and so I considered the photograph as being for the birds. But anyway, Dame Frances Yates was terribly inspired by the revival of the Hermetic tradition on the part of Giordano Bruno and others, and one of her books is called The Art of Memory. And in The Art of Memory, where she and some of her other books, she has proven, I think, really to the satisfaction of just about everybody, including the scholarly world, that the Renaissance drama, and which came to its greatest fruition where? In England, with Shakespeare. And that Shakespeare knew his Hermetic philosophy from A to Z, and that the Shakespearean, or the Renaissance, the English Renaissance drama was an expression of the Hermetic philosophy, but not only that, that much in the dramatic works was there in order to stimulate what? To stimulate a far memory. And that far memory is, look here, Englishman, or whoever you were, and a lot of Shakespeare has Italian themes, because that's where the Renaissance was coming to England for in Elizabethan times. But he says, look here, try to remember, try to remember who you really are. You are not what you appear to be. You are not what the society and the church and everybody wants you to be. You are something else. And of course, in some of the really magical Shakespeare, like The Island, which was always my favorite, there you can really see how the magic at the island and the angels and so forth awakens people to a reality, the people who came there. There's some very interesting quotations there that relate to this sort of thing. Remember, awaken from your torpid condition, and no longer believe what they tell you are, but discover who you really are. And I think this is a very likely possibility. And now then, if you want to, let's say, explain that in more concrete terms, then you might say that the drama, starting with the dramatic works of the ancients, but certainly going on into Christianity, where, the only area of, and I have studied a lot of Christian liturgy since I was very young, and so forth, that the only area of the Christian church where, how should we put it, a certain kind of weird theatricality, but really weird, a buffoonery, a comedy came into the church was when the Passion plays developed in the church at Easter time in the Middle Ages, and they were originally performed inside the church, right in front of the altar, But the people, they became so popular, these dramatic performances, that they had to move them out on the plaza in front of the church, because the people, that many people never came to the church services as they came to these little church dramas, so it had to be, and it became things like, they were called the Feast of Fools. Now, that's not a very religious term, where one actor was elected the abbot of misrule. And they performed a ritual that was somewhat of a burlesquing of the Holy Mass, and it was called the Missa Asinorum, the Mass of the Donkeys. And altar boys and different people, they made a few shekels performing these things, and they put on masks of donkeys, and they were jumping around in the church and later on in front of the church. Hee-haw, hee-haw, the Missa Asinorum. Which also, it was sort of Jung wrote about it, all kinds of people wrote about it, because what puzzled people who studied these medieval customs subsequently was that in these plays, kind of the value system, the worldview of the Christian people was turned completely on its head. So that, as I say, donkey business, so there it was a comic performances, turning upside down values and things of that sort. And as Jung commented on it, well, when that sort of thing is done, and done very carefully and with a particular intention, it can be quite helpful, because it releases forces from the unconscious. We are held within certain shackles by the customs of the age, and it's no longer the values of the Judeo-Christian worldview and things like that. Then there are others, and they are enforced perhaps even in more draconic fashion than the earlier ones were. So what is happening now, let's bring to your attention the new value system, all concentrated on race, all concentrated on gender change and things of that sort, but it is still a worldview that has its own peculiar valuations. So there is always something that comes in that creates a different reality for people, and perhaps also a feast of fools. Now then, I think the time is approaching for us to conclude. But let me, this I think is important. It's very well known to all students of drama, of the theater, that the classical Greek drama, which developed out of the goat songs and all this sort of thing, and now of course had human motifs, but still originated that way, at certain definite phases, certain definite divisions. Edward Edinger, the late Jungian analyst and writer, fabulous writer, has written extensively about the psychological meaning of these, the structure of the Greek drama. And this is how it goes. The drama starts with what in Greek is called agone. That's where we get the word agony from. But it doesn't mean necessarily a tremendous amount of agonizing and suffering, but it means a conflict, a contest. So the drama of our life, which hopefully leads to what Jung would call individuation, in other terms we might say it leads to enlightenment, starts with conflict. No conflict, no wisdom. Now that sounds a little bit bad, because we don't enjoy conflict. although we enjoy certain perverse byproducts of conflict, let's say. For instance, you probably have noticed that already over the last couple of years. People enjoy being scared. Fear is an attraction. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any horror movies. There wouldn't be any Stephen King, whom I actually like, although I like H.P. Lovecraft better. But you know, it's a tickle. It's a tickle in the psyche. It's a little bit like a sexual tickle, but it is there, and therefore you have to be very careful, because there will always be people, for whatever agendas of their own, who are going to try to promote fear in order to advance their own purposes. I lived on the Nazis, even though I was quite young, but you know, I lived on the communists, and I can tell you that the biggest weapon of those sorts of nasty people is making you afraid. When you're afraid, you're going to be a good boy. You're going to be the littlest Nazi, you know. You're going to be the littlest communist. Why? Because the fear has conditioned you to behaving that way. But if there were no immediate payoff in the feeling of fear itself, then it wouldn't happen. So that's why we have the skeletons in the Halloween. That's why we children, you know, like to go into a dark room with the suspicion in their heads that there's really something scary in there, but you still want to go in. You still want to see what's in there, you know. This is human. But we have to watch out that these human tendencies that we possess are not going to be misused and used in a way that will be very deleterious to us. So, need I say more? Well, even if I need to say more, I ain't gonna do it, okay? Not right now. But here is the agonie, conflict, contest, struggle of one kind or the other. And then the battle, the contest in the tragedy, in the drama, ends with pathos. You heard the word being pathetic. This is sorrowful, sad. It's a pathos because the conflict ends in defeat in the Greek drama. And then when the defeat has occurred, the hero or heroes are lying down on the floor, and then comes the chorus, and they mourn and wail, you know. They go around in a circle and they say, oh, I don't know, whoever, dear Agamemnon, look at him, he's dead, oh, horror, oh, terror, oh. If they were Jewish, they would go, oy vey, oy vey. But it's that sort of thing. And as Edward Edinger said, you know, we all have our defeats in our lives. We all have things that cause us sorrow. We can't live in any other way. But the defeat has to be acknowledged by consciousness. Yes, I have trouble, whatever the case may be. Yes, my wife is going to leave me, or whatever the case may be. You have to acknowledge it, and when you acknowledge it, then you allow yourself to be the chorus of the mourners. You know, so that is the threnos or the lamentations. Now you might see the great. So where do we go from there? Now comes something very, very different, and that is really the hope. That is why you go to the Greek drama, so that you will walk away with something hopeful. And that is the theophania, which means, theos means God, and the theophany is the manifestation of the God, and that is the divinely ordered, the divinely accomplished solution or redemption. So usually a God comes out of the cloud and he fixes everything up. And then you don't have to mourn anymore. Often he'll resurrect a hero who has just died. So what is this? Once again, it's a dramatization of the way life should be. We should engage in the conflict. We shouldn't sit on the side and say, "Oh, it's too difficult to deal with life." No, I'm just going to sit in a kind of permanent lockdown and eat junk that I can buy in the junk food store, and I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to do anything. And of course, maybe we have been trained a little bit that way over the last couple of years, haven't we? But that is the contest, and we get defeated by various forces in life. But there is something else, and that something else is that there is a higher world. There is a realm where, the way the Greeks envisioned it, upon Mount Olympus, which is usually shrouded by crowds. I had a friend who lived in Greece for a long time, and he said he sat literally down on the bottom of Mount Olympus for something like 2 days, because he wanted to see a time when the clouds would move away, and they did not move away. So that's where the gods are. But they're hiding there. But if you live right, if you take the lessons of your difficulty, of your contest and of your defeat, and you don't despair, but you maintain hope in your higher faith, and then the God comes and redeems you. And in Rome, where they continued with these things, in Rome the name for this God in the theater who will come and fix things up was Deus ex machina, the God out of the machine, because they lowered him with some pulleys and ropes, They lowered him on the stage, and then he fixed everything up. One wishes, but you can even, let's say, Mozart in the Magic Flute, you see the same motive, and so we have to look for the saving power, for the redeeming power, which, since we are not ancient Greeks, won't come from the top of the mountain, but maybe it will come from the top of our soul. Because there's a contact there, but the contact has to be cultivated, and then the help comes. There comes unity, there comes sympathy, there come ideals, and these help us to rise from the lamentations in which we may have found ourselves, and there is a solution and a redemption. So let me jump back and then conclude. Jump back to the basic thesis. The Gnostic tradition, in many different manifestations, including the Hebrew and the Arab and others, tells us that we have come from the true self has come from a high and holy condition. But it has descended, it has become alienated from its source, and now it is in an unhappy state. But it need not stay in that unhappy state. If it addresses itself to the Deus ex machina and so forth, if it addresses itself to the true self, to the true enlightener, to the true helper, it can be even after it feels that it has been defeated. And some existentialists said that you have to experience a death of your soul. You know, in other words, you haven't lived until you died. But let's say you can, if you do it right, then the drama will now turn, and you will come back to yourself, and you will be redeemed out of the misery, and actually come to a much greater, much more complete, a much more wonderful consciousness. But you can't stay in the animal form, you know. You can't be captured by the lesser world, of which the animal shapes and the animal masks are the symbols, because that's not what you are. You have come down into that. Yes, you are wearing the body of an animal. Was it William Butler Yeats, who has wonderful poems, very magical and so on. In one of them, I just remember that particular passage, and he said of himself, I am shackled to a dying animal. So the I is tied to this body, and the body dies, and the body is, as soon as it's born, it's already trying to die. You know, that's why so many children die and everything else. This is the problem. But if we can get past that, and then we will no longer be shackled by it, but we have to learn how to deal with the body and the physical aspect as a reality, but not the only reality. It's the kind of reality that your car is, only you can't, you can't pet, well, if you want to, you can pet a car, but I think it wouldn't be a very productive enterprise. but let's say this is something that you inhabit and that you use for a while, and then it will go its own way. And that is why as Cicero said, and some of the other Roman writers said, the greatest gift that they could discern on the people who went through the Eleusinian mysteries, the greater mysteries, was that they all lost completely the fear of death. Now, when you can accomplish that, boy, then you've really got a good mystery going there. There is just no doubt about it. But it also has, I think, a message for us. As a certain guru said to a friend of mine, or to a friend of mine, he said, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. The worst thing that can happen, you die. So is that really so bad?" It was Meher Baba, by the way, an Indian Sufi. And it's true. I mean, those who believe in reincarnation, they'll say, well, look, it's an experience that you've gone before. Just because you don't remember it doesn't mean you haven't done it before. But whatever the case may be, the fear is not at all helpful. It's very, very counterproductive. That is why we have to acknowledge our difficulty, and the difficulty being that we are living in a body that is the product of nature and the product of animals, but we don't have to be dominated by it. Sure, we have to take care of it like any animal. I mean, when my family had horses, well, we had to feed them every day, you know, and various other things. Not only bring them nice big pieces of Hungarian sugar, and they really liked it. So you have to take care of the physical. You have to be intelligent about it, but you don't have to let it run the show, because you should be like a centaur. You are on the horse, but you are not the horse, mystically speaking. And then, you know, everything is all right. But, you know, why that is difficult, and more difficult now perhaps than it has been previous times, because we are living in a materialistic, a secular, a godless, a spiritless society and culture. And when you live in that kind of a thing, then what else is there? Then you have to hang on to the body, then you have to hang on to the physical, you have to hang on to your bank account, you know, whatever the case may be, because that's all you've got. But in addition to what you've got, remember who you are. You are not those things. You are not the world. You are something else. You came from another dimension. You came from another reality, and to that reality you shall go. And meanwhile, you do the best that you can and aspire to the heights. Aspire to liberation, aspire to individuation, aspire to obtaining mastery over the external situation and the external vehicle, instead of being mastered by all of these things. You can do it. Many people have done it. Many people in East and West and North and South, many people have done it. And they were people just like you. And therefore, since you can do it and I can do it, let us do it. Let us do it. Thank you.